Will homeschooling cause your child to resent you? Personally, that was one of the things that I was really worried about when I started my homeschool journey. And I think it's one of the things that we think about a lot. Will they resent me for certain things that will look different because you do homeschool? Or because you're thinking of homeschooling. Maybe you are thinking of homeschooling, you don't homeschool. Resentment in homeschooling. Let's chat. But before we chat, if it's your first time here, I would like to introduce myself.
My name is Gina, and I'm a Canadian homeschool mom of 3 kids. We currently live off-grid in the middle of nowhere in the Canadian wilderness. I love sharing all things homeschooling, our love for Christ, and off-grid adventures. I'm a strong believer that the greatest legacy we can leave our children are happy memories. So come along and join us on this amazing journey. Now, before we start, I did want to share something special with you guys. Friends, I am so excited because I am one of the speakers at the For Love of Homeschooling virtual conference, where I'll be sharing my personal journey titled From Struggle to Strength, My Homeschool Journey and Mental Health Triumph. For just $25, you'll gain access to over 35 workshops covering various homeschooling topics, all from the comfort of your home. As a bonus, you'll receive a grab bag valued at over $200, including a full year 2024 homeschool planner, homeschool encouragement cards, a rainbow classroom poster, and so much more. Whether you're a parent navigating early learning or guiding middle and high schoolers, we have curated workshops to enrich, educate, and prepare you, plus exclusive discount codes from some of our speakers. Act fast. The special price is available until February 12th. Don't miss out on this opportunity to enhance your homeschooling journey. Click on my special link to secure your spot. Guys, I'm so excited, and I hope that this homeschool conference can bless you. Now, let's get back to the video.
Okay, this is gonna be like a very interesting video because I was talking to a lot of different moms, and one of the first things that came up is that I don't want my child to resent me. I really don't want my child to resent me if I choose, this new lifestyle. I do think homeschooling is a bit of a lifestyle change as well. And I did speak to a couple of different homeschoolers that did homeschool, and they said that they resented their parents for homeschooling. And that really, I was like, wow. And these came from people that I don't know. It's people online that comment on my videos, send me DMs on Instagram, send me emails, and I ask them questions like, okay, I really want to understand, like, why did you resent your parents? So we have a bit of case studies of people that I've spoken with so we can really dive deep into resentment in homeschooling. Is it homeschooling or is it more than homeschooling? We're going to chat about all these things. You can resent your parents even if you don't homeschool, right? So where does resentment come from? And we're speaking about children, kids, specifically. Children can sometimes resent their parents for many different reasons, and the intensity and causes of resentment can vary from children to children. Here are some common reasons why children do resent their parents. Some of them is because the parent is super controlling. And sometimes when you think of homeschooling, you think of controlling parents, right? There's a difference between being a parent that is concerned and then a parent that is like overly strict, overly controlling. When parents like are overly control their kids' lives. So that's one of the reasons why children just in general resent parents. Another one is lack of understanding and empathy. And sometimes us as parents, we can grab those those traits that we are used to like hearing, and just because we're from different generations, right, from our parents. So the lack of understanding what the child is going through sometimes can be a reason for a child to resent a parent. Unfair treatment and favoritism, that can happen. Not intentionally, but sometimes you can, because you have a younger child, you are more, favoritism is a little bit like the child could be like, oh, that's your favorite. That's why you're treating them differently, right? It can happen a lot with like the oldest thinking that, because the younger kids, and he's like, oh, why do I have to do more stuff than them? Or, is it because they're the favorite or whatnot? So I could see that being a reason why kids would resent their parents. Emotional and physical abuse, that's one of them as well. A lot of people think that because you homeschool, you're abusing your kids. I had a couple of like people comment on my videos saying just basically, you're an abusive person because you homeschool. So a lot of people think homeschooling abuse. Unfulfilled expectations, maybe that you have certain expectations of your children and maybe they're not meeting it. So you're very kind of like hard on your kids. They're never living to their expectations. Lack of emotional support and attention. Kids sometimes feel like they don't have the attention of the parents. And I can see that happening a lot. Just in general with today's society of us go, 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 go. To tell you the truth, this is one of the reasons why I homeschool is for more attention with my kid, like for me to give my kids more attention and for me to be there for like the moments, right? So, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Poor communication, dismissing their opinions and feelings. And it can cause a bit of frustration and resentment sometimes when your child feels like you don't understand them. Someone commented on my videos and they sent me emails as well, and we went back and forth, and I really wanted to understand where this resentment was coming from because hello, I'm a homeschool mom. I'm aware that, you know, your kids can have these type of resentment. There's a difference between being a parent and having like rules, but also like you doing things that can cause resentment towards your children, right? I think being self-aware is very important. And I think that if you are thinking about like, oh man, I don't want my kids to resent me, you're gonna be looking for kind of like, okay, what are certain things that can cause resentment? Maybe things that I didn't even notice that I was doing, and this can cause resentment in my kids. And regardless if you homeschool or not, because I don't feel like homeschooling equals resentment, because homeschooling can be something very beautiful. It could be something that the kids can look back on and being like, man, like I had such a great childhood because I homeschooled. But it could be the opposite way where, you know, kids connect homeschooling to resentment. So anyways, I was speaking to a person and they mentioned that I resent my parents because they chose to homeschool. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, you know, you feel that way. What happened? And they mentioned that they didn't have any friends. They always wanted to have friends, and they spoke up and said that like, you know, mom, I feel lonely. I want friends. And the mom just kind of brushed it off like, you don't need friends. Like, we're fine. You know, you don't need to socialize with anyone. So for me, when I think of that, I just can say, I'm sorry you went through that. That's not our case. Because one of the things that I listen to with my kids is I make sure that if they're feeling lonely, guess what? Mom's gonna find a homeschool family. We're gonna find friends for you to hang out with. None of my kids are gonna feel lonely. You speak to a lot of homeschoolers and they say they have the best friendships in their lives. I've spoken to people as well. So it goes both ways. And you go to people in public school that go to public school and be like, man, I hated my public school experience because I felt so lonely. So it doesn't mean one way or the other, because a lot of people think that being in a room full of kids, it makes you feel good. Some kids actually thrive in not being so many kids and being around so many kids, and thrive having only a few friends. So in the beginning of my homeschool journey, because socialization was one of those things that I was like so worried about, you know, that I went all out and I did like every type of activity, every type of co-op. And I started homeschooling before the pandemic happened. We were very involved. It got to a point where Nicholas, my oldest, he told me like, Mom, I need a break from people. Like, we're just doing this too much. I'm seeing too many people. You can overstimulate kids too, like with too many kids and doing too many things. So you have to notice that. And I listened to him and I said, okay, great. Thanks for telling me. We're gonna take a step back because we don't need to do all these things if that's not something you need. I have a friend where she said that her daughter, she's a social butterfly. So she likes doing all the things. So her mom, she homeschools and she makes sure that she does all these different activities and she loves it and she thrives on it. But there's some kids that they don't need all that. So homeschooling, you can tailor to your kids' needs when it comes to what they need socially. Yes, we socialize with family, we socialize with brothers and sisters, and that's important. I think that there's such a great bond that comes from that, because even though I went to public school, I'm very, very close to my brothers and sisters because we grew up in a family where we didn't have a lot of money, in the sense of like going out all the time. My friends were always going out all the time. And in my head, I didn't resent my parents for that because I knew that we were on a tight budget. So it's not, I go back and I think like, oh, my parents didn't let me do this or that because I couldn't go to the movies with my friends because I knew my parents, That's not something that they could afford every weekend for us to be going out with our friends. So we were really a close-knit family where my brothers and sisters, we hung out a lot. And that's because of that, I think is like a blessing in disguise in a way, because you see a lot of siblings and they're not close. I could never imagine not being close to my siblings. Like, they're my best friends. But anyways, and we have age gaps. We have my youngest brother, which he's already married, but we're 9 years apart and we're all best friends. So regardless of the age gap, my sister is 5-6 years apart from me. We talk every single day. We are best friends, and that age just becomes nothing after a while. But anyways, having said that, I think there's something very special about homeschooling and the sibling bond. It's very, very important. And I see that in my kids. Like, they're really good friends. Do they fight? Yeah. All siblings, you know, have their little bickering stage, and that's fine, but they have this like connection. And if my kids need more, I ask them, like, do you guys want to do more? Do you want to do less? And sometimes they'll tell me, like, Mom, I don't want to do this. Like, is it okay if we just like hang out with each other? Or sometimes they'll be like, yeah, we do want to do more stuff. So I make sure I meet them where they need to. And that's the beauty of homeschooling, is you can meet them where they need to. There's so many different groups out there. So I just wanted to point that out, that some people might have that experience, but that doesn't mean that it's everyone's experience. That's one person that I'm talking about that I've spoken to. And yes, that can happen. And I'm sorry if that's you, if you're watching my video and that's you. I'm very, very sorry that's you, but that does not mean that it's my home. I just want to be clear on that you're the one who's going to decide if your child is lonely or not. You can make that decision. And sometimes it's hard because parents sometimes feel also like they're very introverted, and then they're going to have to, because it does take your time. It is your time. It's time consuming trying to find a right group. You're going to have to be friends with that parent as well, because it's just the way it is. And sometimes you're gonna have to get out of your comfort zone as well. It's gonna be uncomfortable sometimes for you as well. You know your family better, and you're gonna tailor to it. I was at the park with my kids, and naturally they're playing with other kids, and they weren't homeschooled kids. They were just like they're public school kids. And I was sitting down, the mom was talking to me, and she asked me, which school does your kids go to? We homeschool. She's like, oh wow, that's crazy. Like, I could never do that, even though I never asked her if she could do it or not. Like, people love saying that. I could never do that, right? Even though I didn't ask you, but thanks for sharing. And they say it kind of like in a tone of like, maybe they're not trying to be like that, but just the way I feel sometimes, like, I didn't ask you if you could. Like, I don't even want to tell you that I homeschool. Like, it doesn't matter. She's like, your kids are so great at, like, you know, like talking to other kids. Like, yeah, we homeschool, we're not like locked up in a cage. And a lot of people think that. So they're playing and everything. And then she asked me, like, what is your reasons for homeschooling? Like, why do you want to do that? And I explained to her that one of the reasons is because I really wanted to be there for my kids. I wanted to see the milestones. I really feel like we're living life. And she got very quiet. I resented my dad because he was not there for me for a lot of things. Like, he was always working. I think he was a doctor or something like that. And he wasn't really there for his kids. And she said that she really resented until this day her father, and they have a bad relationship. She went to public school. She didn't homeschool. And she's like, that's amazing that you're able to be there for your kids, and they could feel that. And she says, sometimes I feel like I'm so busy with life that I'm not being able to be there with my kids because of the hustle and bustle of life. And I'm just listening, right? I was like, yeah, that's one of the reasons I homeschool. But she's like, I resented my dad for that. Now, does that mean that every person that has a father or mother that works a lot, that they're going to resent you for that? No, they're not. My dad is a perfect example. He actually worked. There was one point where he's working 7 days a week. I would barely see my dad. We come from a very big family. There's 5 kids, my mom, my dad, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. So my mom was always there. She was always very, very present. And my dad was always working. Even on holidays, my dad would work. But he was never there for like school plays and that kind of stuff. My dad wasn't, because he was always working. I don't resent my dad for that. I actually understand it. And I'm like, man, my dad was such an amazing dad because he was there to provide for us. Now, I'm not saying that her feelings are not valid for her feeling that way. I don't know what happened there. But it's just a way of like, I understood. Sometimes the lack of your child not understanding what's going on, sometimes that can cause resentment. So open communication, I feel like, you know, when we were talking about open communication, I think that's very, very important in anyone's life, you know, of really communicating with your kids This is the reason why we're doing this. This is the reason why we homeschool. Every year when we start a new year, I tell my kids, this is the reason why we are homeschooling. Now, these are more reasons why we homeschool, because we figured them out this year that we actually love homeschooling, because every year you start adding to your list. And it's important to go over that with your kids and be very open. This is why we homeschool. My kids know why we homeschool. They know our reasons why, and they agree with it. And they love homeschooling. Open communication is very, very important. Sometimes our kids can feel like we're controlling, regardless if you homeschool or not. But when you homeschool, we have to be careful with that. Like, we have to make sure that our kids can live life and learn from lessons as well. And I'm going to tell you a story of what happened this summer with my son. So during the summer, we were actually, if you follow me along here, you know that we spent a couple of weeks like at a trailer park resort, and there was a lot of kids in the trailer park. Okay, so a lot of kids Nicholas's age, so that was fun. One of the things that I allowed my kids to do is play with other kids. Obviously, back in my day when I would go like to cottages and stuff like that, we would like play with other kids and get to know other kids and play soccer with them and whatnot. So it reminded me a lot of my childhood, like ride bikes together. And I don't know if that's something that you can relate to. He said, Mom, can I go and play soccer with the kids? There's like a soccer field. Can I go play with them? I'm like, yeah, sure. Go play with them. Come back in a couple of hours, like 2 hours. If you're not back in 2 hours, I'll come get you. And so fine, perfect. He went to go and play with the kids, and then 45 minutes later, he's back. And with like, he was a sad face. He looked like he was a little bit, like he was sad. He was really sad. And I'm like, what happened? I'm like, did these kids bully him? I'm like, oh no, like what happened, right? It just reminded me a lot of like me growing up and stuff like that. And I have like a lot of like feelings when it comes to being like picked on and stuff like that. So at first I'm like, you know what, look, what happened? He's like, oh, nothing really huge. I just couldn't stay there anymore. I'm like, okay. I was like, what happened? Tell me what happened. Suspense is killing me. He's like, well, we're playing soccer. Whenever the boys would get like upset, they would swear so much, say a lot of bad words, and I was feeling uncomfortable. I actually I told the boys, and I told him like, you know what, there's different ways of you saying things. You could say like, oh no, like I didn't get the goal, or man, I wish I got the goal. So he was like telling the kids like, maybe you can express yourself that way. And the kids just looked at him like with like he had 3 heads on his on his shoulders. And he said, the kids just looked at him, they continued playing and they continued swearing. So he said like, Mom, I didn't feel good being there. Like I just felt really bad for being there. So I didn't want to hang out with them anymore. So I decided to leave. So he stayed there like for 40 minutes, but he couldn't stay around those kids anymore because they were swearing so much. Now, in our home, we don't use foul language. That's something that we do not do in our home. And your kids are going to want to be around people that have the same character traits as them. Like Nicholas does not swear. He doesn't want to be around people that swear all the time. He noticed that. That's not something that I had to have like a formal conversation with him. Like we don't hang out with people that swear. We know that's not good. So we don't say it. He's not used to hearing those languages. The kids that he hangs out with does not talk like that. Those kids that were his age, 8 and 9-year-olds swearing like sailors, but he didn't feel comfortable. I didn't have to have an uncomfortable conversation with him, or me having to hear that and being like, look, you're not allowed hanging out with those kids because they swear. We know the kind of character traits that God loves, and God does not like foul language. So we don't do that in our home. He doesn't like that either. The people that you are around is the people that you are going to start acting like, you know? So I didn't have to have that conversation with him and tell him, you can't be friends with so-and-so. I felt comfortable enough for Nicholas to know what good character is because I feel like he's 9 right now. He's gonna turn 10 soon. I felt so happy when he told me that. Like I actually cried because I was like, man, I'm so happy. This just shows me that we're in the right path. And I'm not saying that my son is holy and we're perfect, no. But just to give you an example, I didn't even have to have a conversation with him. It's our life. It's what we live. And it's such a beautiful thing to see. What are the ways that we can minimize the likelihood of resentment in our home? This is regardless if you homeschool or not, but like, because we're homeschooling and this is like a homeschool channel, what are some ways that we can make sure that we don't allow our kids to feel that resentment towards us as parents? Here are just some things that I came up with and that I thought of to foster open and honest communication. I feel like that's so important. Like Our kids should want to communicate things with us, and we should take their opinions into consideration. Just like when, if your child tells you that they want more friends, okay, how can we do that? And sometimes it is harder. That doesn't mean that it's not, but realize that that's something that they have emotions, they have opinions, they have feelings that they're feeling. So let's make sure that we recognize that and make it sure that we create a safe and non-judgmental, environment for our kids. I never want my son to feel uncomfortable asking certain questions, because they're going to learn things from us. And sometimes the things that we learned in school are things that we're going to have to teach. I'm talking about the birds and the bees, that kind of stuff. Like those are certain things that, I'm gonna be honest with you, my son Nicholas, he feels very comfortable asking those questions. And we have quite a bit of different stories regarding that, and that's for a different time. But usually my husband's the one dealing with the boys and I'll be the one dealing with the girls. But he's in that age where he's asking a lot of questions. And that's one of the reasons why I'm gonna be doing the unit from Gather Round, Growing Up with God. I haven't started that yet, but I'm going to do that with him. And yeah, so if they have questions, I want to make sure that my kids ask me those questions. They're not asking it outside, or they're not keeping stuff bottled up. They're going to ask me questions, and I want to feel that I am the person that they want to ask those questions to. I'm the type of person that I apologize a lot to my kids. When I do something that I feel like that I should have not done, or maybe I spoke to them more harshly than I should have, or I did something wrong, I admit it and I say I'm sorry. And I want my kids to know that I pray and I'm a sinner, and I ask God for forgiveness because I'm not perfect and I am learning to, and we are learning together. So I want to make sure that my kids know that, even when it comes to curriculum and stuff like that. If they're going to voice their concerns about something, I always ask my kids, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? What do you think we should change? This is our homeschool. I don't make all the rules. This is us together. We're doing this. Obviously I make the most important decisions, but I do make sure that they have a say in stuff as well. We're a family, I want to make this an enjoyable experience for all of us. A lot of people tell me also about oh, I'm sad because my kids are going to miss prom. They're going to miss the dances because I had such a good experience. I'm not talking about me, but people tell me that they had a good experience. I don't really care about that kind of stuff. Actually, I did go to prom, and I would say that my prom experience, I have memories. The good memory is that my husband and I invited my husband to prom, and that's when we first started dating. Not dating, but we had our first kiss during prom. I remember that as something oh, that was nice and everything that happened in prom, but I'm remembering the people dancing, teachers watching the kids dance that way. I wouldn't want my kids to be around that. Personally, I don't think it's a good environment for kids to be in. I don't care if I was 17 at the time. It's you're at a club, right? And you're dancing and you're doing all those moves, I'm not gonna explain it to you, but yeah, I don't think that's a good environment for kids, but in my opinion. But there's other things you can do. You can recreate different scenarios. One of the things that I'm doing right now, Valentine's Day is coming up, and I don't think my kids really it's not something they're because they don't know, they've never been to school, and maybe your kids have, and they have good memories of Valentine's Day and getting little cards and everything, and that was fun. I thought that was fun. So I'm recreating that in a way, and we're getting together with 20 different kids and we're exchanging Valentine's Day cards, and it's gonna be so much fun. And you can recreate different things to make it look a little bit different. Same thing, do a prom with a bunch of different homeschool kids. So there's different things that you might be able to do for you to give your kids, that thing that they need, whether it's socialization or it's an experience that you want to give them, right? There's different ways to recreate it. Avoid excessive control. So I think that's really important too, because I gave you the example of my son, he went and he hangs out with those kids. Imagine if I told him, no, you're not allowed hanging out with those kids. I don't know who their parents are. And maybe that could be your kids best, and maybe you don't feel comfortable with this. But in the way I raise my son, I do feel he knows when he should remove himself from a situation, and I felt comfortable with that situation. So everyone's different. But sometimes when we have that excessive control where we don't allow certain things to happen so our kids can learn from it, it can be not good for our kids either, where there's that resentment. Oh, my parents don't let me hang out with anyone. I let Nicholas go with those kids and play with them. He made his decision. He said, I don't want to be friends with those kids. They swear a lot. And look, we learned a lesson there. It showed me something about our homeschool, but also showed me about my son's character. And honestly, to me, that's everything. And be fair and avoid favoritism. I think that's really important too. That's something that sometimes it can happen regardless if you homeschool or not. I sometimes like catch myself sometimes being like, Lily's smaller, right? She's more delicate. She's like a girl, So sometimes I can see that happening. Not that I favorite any child of mine, but your child can feel that way. And if they voice that concern, be like, okay, so why do you feel that way? And we could explain, the reason why, Lily, I did that with Lily is because of this, this, and this. Sometimes kids need to hear it from you. Communication, right? Of this is the reason why, not be like, oh, stop being so dramatic. You shouldn't be feeling that way because that's not, I don't favorite anyone. Explain to them, I'm sorry you feel that way. That's not my intention for you to feel that Lily is my favorite. But the reason why we're doing this is because X, Y, and Z. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes all we need to do is communicate a little bit better. I'm talking to myself too, because sometimes I feel like with the hustle and bustle and everything going on, you could forget to communicate. Communication is so important. Providing emotional support. Now, I feel like sometimes our kids need help to develop healthy coping mechanisms and problem-solving skills. And I'm gonna be honest with you that I'm working on that myself. So sometimes it's kind of hard for us, like how are we gonna, I think everyone's working on that, right? Everyone has something that they've done before or how they were raised that you're kind of like, I want to change kind of things that up a bit because I don't feel like that was like a good way of dealing with it, because you're learning, you're growing. And providing that emotional support is so important. And that's going back to like communication, setting realistic expectations, because you could be like, oh man, Michael's 5 years old. He is way ahead for his age. Now, am I going to put an expectation like that on my daughter if she's not the same way as Michael, or an expectation on, Nicholas, because, other kids are, advanced. We do that a little bit sometimes in homeschooling, is that we want our kids to be more advanced than they should. I'm more worried of me pushing my kids too much. And sometimes I feel like I don't, because I don't want to push them, and you're kind of like, oh, learn through play, or don't push the academics. No, it's all learning through play. Push the academics, learning through play, push the academics. It's almost like that kind of clash. And it's almost like you just gotta know what's best for your kids and do what's best for your kids. And for Michael, that was kind of like a learning experience for me, because I didn't wanna push formal education on him, but he was so ready. Setting realistic expectation for each of your kids, when they're ready, and not pushing them. That's one of the things that I think in homeschooling is like, my child's behind this. My child is, a bit more advanced than yours. It's not a game. It's not a race here. So setting realistic expectations is really important, and not thinking that our kids are like these person that has to be perfect all the time, because I'm not perfect, and they're going to have their strengths and weaknesses, and we have to understand that that's normal, and not putting those expectations that are really harsh, right? That doesn't mean that your kids are not going to, they're not going to do any schoolwork, or they're not going to, no, it's just, or they're not going to have any chores or anything like that, responsibilities. It just means that let's put realistic expectations on our kids, right? Spending quality time together. That's really important for our kids. And I feel like with homeschooling, that's one of the reasons why I started homeschooling, is to spend quality time with my kids, because that was lacking before. But sometimes that can be lost in the homeschool as well. I am going to mention on an update video of things that I'm doing to spend quality time with my kids one-on-one, and something new that I'm going to be doing. So stay tuned for that. I think sometimes that we say like, oh, but I spend so much time with my kids doing this, this, and this. And sometimes you lost somewhere with homeschooling too. So just being like, just noticing like, you know what? Am I spending quality time? Like quality time. I'm not talking about doing a math lesson when it's like book work, or I'm talking about like certain things, like being present. I think that's really important, and that could get lost in homeschooling too. Like, just because you homeschool doesn't mean it's like always rainbows and sunshine, right? So can homeschooling cause resentment? Yes, in a way, but so can you going to public school. I don't think it's the homeschooling, not the public school. It's you. A parent still can do all those things that I listed, those traits that I listed, they still can do if a child goes to public school. But us as parents, because we're worried about this whole resentment, you're gonna take steps to make sure that, you know what, we have the best experience ever homeschooling. And if there is any situations where there's not open communication, now is the time for you to change that. If there is a situation where you need to talk to your kids about, this is the reason why I did not let you do this. Sometimes communication is the key here. And I know that every kid is different. I know that every situation is different. And my story is not going to be your story. But I hope that this video could help you in a way in understanding a little bit more about resentment. I know I learned a lot, just kind of like reflecting on it, things that I want to change in myself to do better. There's nothing wrong with you growing. This is a journey, and you're going to grow with your kids. You're going to change with your kids, and hopefully for the better, right? We want to make sure that it's for the better. You being self-aware of certain things is very, very important. So guys, that is the video on resentment. Thank you so much for watching, guys. And of course, I will see you in my next video.